And when he sipped his cup, he would sip over here so that no one, usually people sip here. So he would sip here because you won't find people sipping like that.
It's 1:55 in the morning, and Mary Jenkins is finishing her shift at Graceland. She's been working the graveyard shift for years, but tonight feels different. She approaches Elvis one last time, asking if he wants anything to eat. "No, I'm not hungry," he tells her. Those would be the last words the king of rock and roll ever spoke to another human being. But here's what nobody talks about. Elvis didn't work normal hours like the rest of us. While America slept, Elvis was wide awake, prowling through his mansion like some kind of nocturnal predator. Mary Jenkins worked from 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. And let me tell you, the things she witnessed during those dark hours would make your skin crawl. Elvis lived his entire life backwards. When you and I were winding down for the day, that's when Elvis was just getting started. 7 p.m. was his morning. 2 a.m. was his bedtime. He'd transformed himself into a vampire, hiding from the daylight world that had made him famous. But why? What was he running from during those normal daylight hours? Mary Jenkins found out the hard way just how twisted Elvis's midnight world really was. In September of 1974, Elvis decided he was going to buy Mary a house. Sounds generous, right? Wait until you hear how this actually went down. Elvis loaded 9 people into his brand-new pink-topped Cadillac station wagon. 9 people crammed into one car, including Mary, Billy Smith, Joe Smith, George Klein's ex-wife Barbara, and 3 real estate ladies. They're flying down the Memphis streets at breakneck speed, and Mary Jenkins is literally begging for her life. "Lord, Mr. Elvis, please, slow down. You're going to kill us." But Elvis is in one of his manic states. He's on what Mary called a buying spree. He'd just purchased houses for Billy Smith and Joe Smith, too. When Elvis got into these episodes, money meant nothing. Control meant everything. So they pull up to this house on Devon Street, and everyone's standing around waiting for the real estate agent to get the key from next door. That's when people start looking around, asking, "Where's Elvis?" Billy Smith walks around the side of the house, and what does he find? Elvis has torn the screen right off the kitchen window, and he's trying to break into the house that he doesn't even own yet. Billy says, "Elvis, you can't do that." And Elvis looks at him with those cold eyes and says, "I'll tell you what, son, I can do whatever I want to. This is my house." Think about that for a second. Elvis is literally breaking into someone else's property because in his twisted mind, money equals ownership, equals power, equals the right to do whatever he wants. The house wasn't his, the papers weren't signed, but Elvis had decided, so Elvis was taking. But here's where it gets really creepy. They finally get inside the house legally, and the actual homeowner shows up unexpectedly. This poor woman walks into her own house and sees a crowd of strangers, including Elvis Presley. She's confused, probably scared, and then Elvis looks right at her and says, "Well, I know you. You're Mary Fleming." The woman is stunned. How does Elvis know her name? She's looking around like she's seeing a ghost. Elvis lets her squirm for a moment, enjoying her confusion, her fear. Then he starts laughing and says, "I was in your bathroom looking through your medicine cabinet. Saw your name on a prescription bottle." Let that sink in. Elvis had been snooping through this woman's most private belongings, reading her prescription bottles, learning her secrets, and he thought this was funny. He thought this made her feel special. This wasn't generosity, this was a power play. Elvis needed to know everyone's secrets, needed to control every situation, needed to make people feel vulnerable and grateful at the same time. He paid $22,600 cash for that house. That's over $100,000 in today's money. But it wasn't about the money. It was about control. It was about making Mary Jenkins dependent on him, grateful to him, trapped by his twisted version of kindness. And Mary Jenkins? She became the last person to ever speak to Elvis alive. She was there for his final moments, and what she knew about those dark midnight hours died with her. Mary Jenkins thought she was hired to cook for Elvis Presley. She had no idea she was actually being recruited into a psychological game that would consume 26 years of her life. Because what happened in that Graceland kitchen wasn't about food. It was about power, control, and a twisted form of emotional manipulation that would make a cult leader jealous. Here's how Elvis's food obsession really worked. Mary would prepare his meals in the kitchen downstairs. But that was just the beginning of the ritual. She had to carry that food upstairs to Elvis personally. She couldn't just leave it at the door or hand it to someone else. No, Mary had to stand there and watch Elvis eat every single bite. Think about that for a moment. You're a grown man, one of the most famous people in the world, and you need your cook to stand there and watch you eat like you're a child who can't be trusted with a fork. But it gets worse. While Mary was upstairs playing nursemaid to Elvis, watching him chew his peanut butter and banana sandwiches, the rest of the staff was downstairs in the kitchen, literally starving. Richard Davis, another Graceland employee, said it perfectly. While the rest of us was sitting in the kitchen starving, she'd be upstairs talking to Elvis. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. Elvis was using food as a weapon to create hierarchy, to show who was special and who wasn't. Mary got to be in the presence of the king. Everyone else got to smell the food they couldn't touch. But here's where Elvis's manipulation got really sick. After Mary would watch him eat, he'd lean in close and whisper to her, "Hold on here, Mary, let me tell you something." And then he'd slip her a couple $100 bills. Just like that. Cash in her hand, his voice all low and intimate, making her feel like she was part of some secret club. "Thanks for being so good to me," he'd say with that famous smile. But what he was really saying was, "You belong to me now. This money means you're mine." $200 in the 1970s was serious money. That's like getting a $1,000 tip today. But Elvis wasn't tipping Mary for good service. He was buying her loyalty, her silence, her complete dependence on his whims. And it worked. Mary Jenkins became so psychologically tied to Elvis that she couldn't even function on a normal schedule. She worked those vampire hours for years, her entire life revolving around Elvis's twisted nocturnal world. 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. every single day for over 2 decades. But the food control went deeper than just the eating ritual. Elvis demanded his food really fast. Not when it was ready, not when it was convenient, but immediately when he wanted it. Mary had to drop everything, prepare whatever he craved, and race upstairs to deliver it while it was still hot. This wasn't about hunger. Hungry people can wait 5 minutes for food to cook. This was about testing loyalty. About making sure Mary would jump when he said jump. Every single meal was a test. Are you still mine? Will you still obey me? Are you still grateful enough to drop everything for me? And here's the most disturbing part. Elvis extended this same psychological manipulation to everyone around him. The house he bought Mary, the Cadillacs he gave her, the cash he slipped her in those whispered moments. None of it was generosity. It was all about creating financial dependency. Think about it. If your boss pays for your house, buys you cars, and regularly hands you cash, can you ever really quit that job? Can you ever really say no to them? Can you ever really be free? Mary Jenkins worked at Graceland for 26 years, but she didn't stay because she loved the job. She stayed because Elvis had made it impossible for her to leave. He'd created a golden cage, and Mary was the prize bird trapped inside. The saddest part? Mary probably never even realized what was happening to her. She thought she was special. She thought she was family. She thought Elvis cared about her. But caring doesn't involve watching someone eat like they're a science experiment. Caring doesn't involve financial manipulation. Caring doesn't involve turning food into a power trip. What Elvis created in that kitchen wasn't a workplace. It was a training ground for psychological control, and Mary Jenkins was his most successful experiment. 26 years. That's how long Mary Jenkins worked at Graceland. 26 years of her life dedicated to one man's twisted vision of loyalty. But here's the question nobody wants to ask. Was Mary Jenkins an employee, or was she a prisoner? Because when you really look at how Elvis operated, Graceland wasn't just a mansion. It was a sophisticated psychological prison system, designed to trap people in golden cages they'd never want to escape. Here's how Elvis's system worked. First, he'd identify someone vulnerable, someone who needed what he could provide. Mary Jenkins needed a job, needed security, needed to feel valued. Elvis saw that need, and he exploited it brilliantly. Step 1. Create financial dependency. Elvis didn't just pay Mary a salary. He bought her an entire house. Over $100,000 in today's money, paid in cash. Then he bought her multiple Cadillacs, 4 cars, maybe 6 cars. Nobody knows the exact number because Elvis kept buying them. Then there were those $100 bills slipped to her in whispered conversations, making her feel special, making her feel chosen. But here's the trap. When someone owns your house, owns your car, and regularly hands you cash, you don't work for them anymore. You belong to them. You can't quit because quitting means losing everything. You can't complain because complaining means biting the hand that feeds you. You can't even have your own life because your entire existence depends on keeping them happy. Step 2. Create emotional dependency. Elvis had a saying that Jerry Schilling reported. You take care of me, I take care of you. Sounds fair, right? But that's not how it actually worked. The reality was, you devote your entire life to me, and I'll make sure you can never survive without me. Mary Jenkins worked vampire hours for over 2 decades, 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. every single day. Do you know what that does to a person? It completely isolates you from the normal world. While everyone else is having dinner with their families, Mary was starting her workday. While everyone else was sleeping, Mary was catering to Elvis's every whim. Her entire social life, her entire identity, became wrapped up in being Elvis's cook. She couldn't have normal relationships because her schedule was insane. She couldn't have normal friendships because nobody else understood her world. She couldn't have a normal life because Elvis had designed her existence to revolve entirely around him. Step 3. Create psychological dependency. This is where Elvis's manipulation got really sick. He made Mary feel like family, like she was special, like she was chosen. But family doesn't watch you eat every meal. Family doesn't make you work graveyard shifts for decades. What Elvis created was a cult of personality, where he was the center of everything, and everyone else existed solely to serve his needs. Mary Jenkins thought she was special, but so did Billy Smith, and Joe Smith, and Charlie Hodge, and everyone else who got trapped in Elvis's web. And here's the most disturbing part. It worked so well that even when Elvis died, Mary couldn't escape. She stayed at Graceland for 12 more years, working for Vernon, then working for other family members. She'd been so thoroughly programmed to serve the Presley family that she couldn't imagine any other life. When publishers approached Mary to write her book, they begged her to reveal the juicy details, the secrets, the scandals. You know what she did? She refused. Even when she could have made serious money telling the truth about Elvis, she protected him. Even when she could have finally broken free from his psychological control, she chose to stay silent. Her book flopped because she wouldn't betray the man who had spent 26 years manipulating her. Think about that. Elvis had been dead for years, but his psychological control over Mary Jenkins was still so strong that she sabotaged her own book rather than expose his secrets. That's not loyalty. That's not love. That's psychological imprisonment. Mary Jenkins died in the year 2000, taking Elvis's secrets to her grave. She was 73 or 74 years old, and she'd spent the majority of her adult life serving one man's twisted needs. She never got to have a normal life, never got to be free, never got to discover who she might have been if Elvis hadn't turned her into his personal prisoner. And the most tragic part? She probably thought she was lucky. Mary Jenkins had 23 years to tell the world what really happened inside Graceland. 23 years after Elvis died to finally speak the truth. Instead, she chose silence, and that silence should terrify you. When Mary published her book, Memories Beyond Graceland's Gates, in 1984, publishers were expecting a gold mine. Here was a woman who'd spent 26 years as Elvis's most trusted confidant, who'd witnessed his most private moments, who'd been there for his final words. They were practically salivating for the real story. But Mary gave them nothing. She wrote a sanitized, carefully scrubbed version of her time with Elvis that revealed almost nothing about what actually went on behind closed doors. The publishers begged her to include the juicy details, the scandals, the secrets that would make the book a bestseller. She refused every single request. The book flopped. Hard. It became so obscure that finding a copy today is nearly impossible, especially in hardcover. Mary Jenkins. Why? What was she so afraid of revealing? Think about those whispered conversations Elvis had with Mary. "Hold on here, Mary. Let me tell you something." Then, he'd slip her those $100 bills. But what was he actually telling her during those intimate moments? What secrets was he sharing that made her feel so special, so chosen, so trapped? Mary was the only person who knew Elvis's true mental state during his final years. She was there during his manic episodes, his psychological breakdowns, his moments of complete vulnerability. She saw him when he wasn't performing, when he wasn't the king, when he was just a deeply damaged man, spiraling out of control. And here's what's really disturbing. Mary's timeline doesn't match the official story. She claims she talked to Elvis at 1:55 a.m. on the morning he died, asking if he wanted anything to eat. The official reports say Elvis died sometime between 2 and 3 a.m. That means Mary Jenkins was potentially one of the last people to see Elvis alive, and her account raises serious questions about what really happened in those final hours. Why was Elvis awake at 1:55 a.m.? What was his mental state? What did Mary observe that she never reported? The official story is that Elvis went to the bathroom and died of a heart attack. But Mary's account suggests he was still conscious, still functional, still able to have conversations just minutes before his alleged death. What did Mary Jenkins see that night that she never told anyone? What did she witness that was so disturbing, so damaging, that she chose to take it to her grave rather than reveal it even decades later? Remember, Mary worked those vampire hours for over 2 decades. She saw Elvis at his absolute worst, during his darkest moments, when he thought nobody was watching. She knew about his drug use, his psychological manipulation, his bizarre obsessions. She knew about the real Elvis, not the sanitized version the world wanted to believe in. But even when Elvis was dead, even when she was free to speak, even when she could have made money telling the truth, Mary chose silence. That's not loyalty. That's fear. That's the mark of someone who witnessed something so terrible that she couldn't bear to let it see the light of day. Mary Jenkins died in May 2000, taking Elvis's darkest secrets with her. She was 73 or 74 years old, and she'd spent her entire adult life guarding information that she believed was too dangerous to share. Think about that. What could be so devastating about Elvis Presley that a woman would choose to protect his reputation for 23 years after his death? The answer died with Mary Jenkins. But the evidence of what she was hiding is everywhere, if you know how to look. The bizarre nocturnal schedule, the psychological manipulation, the financial control, the obsessive need to watch people eat, the breaking into houses, the whispered conversations, the $100 bills, the timeline discrepancies. Mary Jenkins wasn't just Elvis's cook. She was his confessor, his enabler, his witness, and ultimately his secret keeper. She knew what Elvis was really like when the cameras stopped rolling and the crowds went home. She knew what happened in those dark, midnight hours when Elvis revealed his true self. And she was so terrified of that truth that she chose to take it to her grave rather than let the world know what the king of rock and roll was really like behind closed doors.